Hi, everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of the Healthful Executive Podcast with me, your host, Rob Dunn. My first guest is Adam Duncan. Adam is a specialist and expert in all things sports therapy and sports science related. He specializes in injury prevention, rehabilitation, as well as sports performance. Adam has worked with extremely high-level athletes from national to European and world champions, not to mention me. He's been my sports therapist now for about 3 years, and I really value his opinion, so I'm delighted that he's on with us today. In this conversation, we talk about things such as what is the corporate environment doing to our bodies? How are we impacted by being sat at desks all day? Things we can do in the gym to offset our sedentary lifestyles. And we even touch on the impact of stress on our bodies. So when somebody says, "Oh, I really feel stress in my shoulders," apparently that is a real thing. So please join me in welcoming Adam Duncan. Adam, the very, very first guest on the Healthful Executive Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time. It is appreciated.
Thank you. I feel honored to be first up. No pressure, eh?
Absolutely. You better get this one right. Genuinely, when I came up with the concept and the idea of doing this, I wrote down a bunch of names, and some were people that I knew I was pretty confident would say yes and help me out. There were some pie in the sky names on there as well, but I'm not making this up. You were absolutely the first on the list. When I started writing that list, Adam Duncan was right there at the top. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's my pleasure. So Adam, I've known you for, I don't know, what, 3, maybe 4 years now. You're my sports therapist. So yeah, I know you pretty well after all those sessions, after all those years.
Tell me all your secrets while you're on the table, mate.
Exactly that. Yeah. You know probably too much about me. So let's not overshare today.
No.
But for those that perhaps don't, I think you've got a really interesting background. So could you perhaps just put a little bit of meat on the bones and tell us who Adam Duncan is?
Yeah, so I started off life in this industry, left it due to a move geographically within the country, and I've come back to it. So hopefully, got a little bit of common ground with some of your listeners. So I started off life, military family, grew up with kind of military background, traveled around the country a little bit as a result of that. But settled down in Portsmouth, was a pretty decent athlete, excelling mainly in football when I was a kid. And then through my kind of education, I did sports science, which I used a lot more in my early kind of career, with strength and conditioning coaching, performance management, biomechanics and all that kind of good stuff, and sports therapy. So I started off quite early on, just going into the gyms, kind of young, kind of athlete, wanted to be in the gym, training people, lifting weights, doing all that good stuff. And started off just personal training, moved more into strength and conditioning coaching, I think, because that's what I was interested in. I managed to put a bit of size on, get a bit strong, draw that kind of clientele in. It was what I was interested in. Had a good career with that, worked with some really cool people, some Commonwealth Games athletes, and even had the pleasure of a few kind of WWE wrestlers that had come over on tour.
Very cool.
Mainly just through, right place, right time, having the right friends. But yeah, some really cool people. And I moved to Southampton and didn't know anyone. So going self-employed in a city where you don't know anyone wasn't probably the best idea I think I've ever had in my life. You do rely on friends, family, referrals to kind of get yourself going. And although I had a good rep, this is kind of pre-Instagram, pre-TikTok, all that kind of stuff. I think
real gym floor connections,
knowing people. Facebook even was fairly new at that point as well. So although I had a good rep, people in Southampton didn't know me, so it didn't matter. It was irrelevant. So I got a job, and I did quite well in the job, and ended up being kind of drawn into the corporate world. Worked a lot in kind of customer service, sales. Quite quickly got promoted up into kind of middle management, and did fairly well for myself in the kind of investment world. Worked with large groups of people, kind of headed up, a floor of 200 odd people as a data protection lead, and was involved in projects and things like that. So had a fairly decent career in the corporate world, to the point where I almost stayed and pursued it and thought that was where I was going to go until retirement. It wasn't until kind of got into my early 30s where I thought, it's not really my passion. Where do I want to go? Where do I see myself? Do I want to be my boss's boss in 10 years? I'm not sure. So I came back to the sports therapy world, kind of renewed my sports massage skills, started PTing people again, just online. And thankfully, I'd been in Southampton long enough at that point, met enough people that I was able to start to talk about what I do. And people kind of knew anyway, because it always came up in subjects. I've always been an avid gym goer, and just transitioned. And I'm now working as a sports therapist full time. I do a lot of sports massage, recovery work. I do online PTing for people, strength and conditioning coaching. And I'm currently halfway through doing a degree in osteopathic medicine, just to further my knowledge and my career.
I think, in a nutshell, perfectly put, really eloquently outlined as usual. And that for me, Adam, I know I've said this to you a bunch of times. One of the reasons I really value coming to you for my treatments is the fact that you understand that I'm a desk-bound athlete, or certainly, was, perhaps less so now.
Yeah.
And so you knew what was going on when I came to you, and I'm like, look, I've been sat at a desk for 10 hours a day, and then I jump onto the jiu-jitsu mats, or I start lifting weights, and these are the challenges. And this is no disrespect, as I think we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. This is no disrespect to anybody that goes straight from college, university into that world. It's just, for me, I see significant value in the fact that you truly understand, because you've been there and done it. You've had the same challenges. You've been sat at desk for 10 hours a day. So I think that background is unusual, but I think that's what makes what you bring to the table quite unique. So that's a great place to kind of jump off from. So let's talk about the corporate setting. What is it doing to us physically?
So I think physically, it's in musculoskeletal disorders, in especially desk-bound people, workers, office-based workers, is huge, and it's a massive contributor to absenteeism and therefore cost to business. You've got physical implications of being sedentary, sometimes not seated in, I don't want to say seated in the correct position, because how you sit, lay, stands to a degree irrelevant, but seated for long periods of time, doing quite small repetitive movements as well. So one of the things I learned in my corporate world is that I did a lean consulting qualification about making processes more efficient and leaning out processes to save time and therefore cost. Also from the customer's point of view, making things a bit more streamlined. But we make our desks and we make our systems to be efficient. So we're doing very, very small movements. Like the mouse is kind of doing this all day. My arm's not doing a full range of motion through the rotator cuff. I'm doing this. We don't tend to, because of technology, have many non-desk based roles to do anymore. We don't print and sign things anymore. We just send a DocuSign through email. We meet through Zoom like this. We don't walk to meetings anymore. So
right.
There's a big impact there, and I think also just from a mentality point of view as well, high stress, high demand, often low reward depending on where you sit within the corporate hierarchy. Tension, time pressures, low decision, low authority. Again, if you're talking about workforce and not a follower mentality rather than leaders. And those kind of stresses will have an impact on the endocrine system, which is your hormones and your chemical balances, and that will always come out physically as well in different ways. So the corporate world is very much set out to have people being as efficient as possible and being sat for as long as possible. Completely get that, because time is money. Okay, but it definitely is having an impact on our health. And there's an interesting point as well. Since COVID, working from home has increased by 48%, and body weight in our population has gone up by 40% in the same time period. So there's also a little bit of stats there for you in terms of post-COVID corporate life, because we're 4 years on now, so it's relevant.
Why? What is the link, or what do you think is the link there between the working from home and the increase in body weight? How have we got to that point?
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't looked at any kind of research, but from speaking to many clients every single day for the last few years, I'm noticing a trend where people are quite often, they're working from their home, so they don't have to kind of get up, get ready, have breakfast, and commute to work. They're not walking the 20 minutes walk to work, or getting in the car and playing some music, then walking up 2 flights of stairs to get to their office via the cloakroom and the coffee room. There's just a lack of movement in the mornings. People are getting up fairly soon towards when they're needed, because they're not needing to commute. They're going straight, making a coffee, sitting on their computers to start work. I think, like I mentioned earlier about meetings being on Zoom now, you no longer need to get up 10 minutes before the meeting, make your way to the meeting room, quite often via the coffee machine or via one of the other people who's in the meetings. You're walking together, then you're walking back. There's just a lack of movement in people's days now. You've also then got the commute home, so you're not finishing up and taking yourself off home. You're already home.
Plonking yourself on the sofa from the office chair.
Absolutely, yeah. Or switching straight into husband mode, wife mode, dad mode, mum mode, or whatever that might be. And there's no boundary, there's no decompression, there's no switch off, there's no ability for you to manage your thoughts and to reduce your kind of stress, reduce your blood pressure, put some good music on, decompress a little bit before you then go back into your next job role, essentially.
I think that's really, I think you make some really, really good points. I certainly felt it when we were asked to work from home. During the pandemic, we went from 5 days a week in the office. I've always been quite fortunate, particularly because I've spent a lot of time in sales and consulting roles. I do a lot of talking. And for me, I find I'm at my best and I'm at my most performative when I'm walking and talking. Yeah. So, I used to wear a hole in the carpet in the office. I was up and down, I was just pacing up and down, but that movement, I tended to find that the conversation flowed a little bit better when I was up and around. That was certainly, it felt harder to do during the pandemic because, I can't go into the kitchen if the wife's making a coffee, or if I wanted to walk out into the garden, then there's oven, and I still want it to sound professional. Something else I'd like to just quickly circle back to, which I think is a really important point, and it's something that I am quite vocal about when I'm speaking to leaders within businesses. We talked about the link between absence that is caused from injury, illness, and the cost to business. And you also touched on the word of efficiency and cost efficiency. I don't think being sat at a desk all day is the most efficient way to conduct your business or have your employees chained to their desk and not moving. I worked for a big corporation for a couple of years, and there was a real vibe of like, why are you not at your desk? If you get, if one of the senior leadership team or the management team caught you not at your desk, it's like, what are you doing? And so there was a real pressure to be kind of at your desk working all the time. But I just need to stretch my legs. I'm an active guy. I also work in pockets of deep work quite well. I can do 90 minutes and I can get a lot done. But if that stretches out to 2.5 hours, and my productivity really dips, So I think there is a bit of a myth around the being efficient and being at your desk completely. I think that movement piece is incredibly important for productivity. And we talk about cost of business. If you want an instant productivity hack, get your employees moving, get them considering their health and their well-being, and let them have some freedom, or encourage them to go out for a walk on lunch. So I'm keen to know what your thoughts are on those points.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I was fortunate enough to work with a Team GB coach a few years back, and they actively encourage people to take early breaks, even when they're doing kind of talks and training within the corporate world. So they'll go in and encourage early breaks so that you don't have this kind of decline in energy over the morning, and then you take a break and you get a little bit back, but you're already down here, and then it just declines, and then you take a break and it declines. We're starting up energy up here, and then it dips a bit, you take a break, and then it dips a bit, you take a break, and then it dips a bit, and you might get your lunch back, and then you end the day on a much higher kind of level of energy by taking regular breaks, making sure there's movement involved in that, non-desk based work within roles for people, and just generally encouraging activity. Yeah, and I think if you can find the balance between having efficient systems and processes within your business with active kind of face-to-face good employee cultures, you'll thrive as a business.
I think you're absolutely right. When it comes to desk workers, of which I was one, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, you've treated me for years now, and so there are as you know, and I'm happy to share, there are a couple of recurring challenges that I raise most times that I see you, and that's generally glutes and lower back issues.
Yeah.
Couple that with the fact that as a practitioner of jiu-jitsu, my hobby is quite explosive. Is there a particular trend in injuries and issues that you're seeing more so with people that are desk workers?
Yeah, so generally it's, I mean, in my world, kind of lower back, neck pain, shoulder pain is always going to be prevalent. It's what pays the bills, and it's always going to be a case regardless of people's backgrounds or what they're doing. But you definitely do see with those kind of desk-based office workers, people in the corporate world, kind of lower back pain, which lower back pain is really multifactional. You can't blame it on musculoskeletal, being sat in a bad chair. There's lots of other things that can come into play with that in terms of stress and things, which we can sort of delve into today or another time. But definitely see a lot of lower back issues, quite often due to restricted hip movements, shortened hip flexors, or muscles just being weakened because they're not being utilized, shortened hamstrings, that kind of impact on the pelvis. The lack of movement is going to cause lower back problems, weakened glutes, like yourself, Rob. And generally neck pain as well. And a lot of the time it's because it's that prolonged seated, holding those positions for long periods of time, and that lack of movement. And I think also education of employees around their kind of workspace setup, around ergonomics and how to set up a desk. In my experience of the corporate world, you were supposed to do a desk assessment every time you moved. It just didn't happen. And it was being done quite often by like your manager who hasn't had any ergonomics training. They're just following a tick box from HR.
Right.
And so what happens there is if you're following a tick box from HR, you're setting up a desk for the average person, whatever that means, and not for the individual in front of you. And so, yeah, very much lower back, restricted hips, neck pain, headaches tends to be quite a big one.
Headaches is really interesting. I put up a video on social media as of the point of this being filmed. This will go out in a couple of weeks, but I put out a post on LinkedIn yesterday of a real conversation that I had with a client. who he basically said to me, Rob, I keep getting these headaches, and by the end of the day, I'm just not feeling like I want to exercise. I just feel knackered. I'm getting these migraines, and I'm feeling like shit. And I asked him two questions. Firstly, how much water are you drinking? And he was like 2 to 3 liters a day. I'm like, okay, fine. Have you changed your caffeine intake? He said, no, I'm having 2 coffees a day. Okay, fine. And I just threw out there, when was the last time you had your eyes tested?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, oh, no, fairly recently. I do have glasses that I'm supposed to wear when I'm on a screen. I just forget to wear them. And so I said, right, let's start there, shall we? And fast forward a week, he's wearing his glasses at his desk when he's at a screen, and the headaches have gone away. And I used to be really guilty of this. I put my glasses on when I had a headache. But when you're talking about headaches, what is it generally that's causing that? Because that, for me, is one of the most common complaints that you'll hear in a corporate environment. It's people complaining that they've got a headache.
Yeah, so as always, it's multifactorial. So it could be that people aren't wearing the right prescription glasses, aren't using opticians and things like that. It could be artificial lighting. It could be stressors. Stress is going to increase blood pressure and all that kind of different physiological factors. From a musculoskeletal point of view, a lot of that's going to be tension. So for every inch that your head goes forward, it increases in weight by 10 pounds on your neck muscles. So wow. If you can imagine, if you're kind of leaning in on a computer or on your phone doing stuff, for every inch you move your head out of this perfect posture forwards, it increases by 10 pounds, which is what, 4.5 kilos.
Yeah. Wow.
So your head weighs a lot. And so you get a lot of tension headaches coming through there. Coming forward and contracting all the muscles in the neck. Some of these come up and attach into your jaw. You'll get jaw pain, and it's so musculoskeletal wise. Again, being on desks, being on phones, is definitely going to cause tension headaches, as well as environmental factors such as artificial light from computers and being in offices, especially in England when it gets dark and people are working late. You're only getting artificial light, and then you're going to drive home at night or whatever it is you're doing. Stress and poor diet, poor hydration, not wearing the right glasses, things like that.
That's really interesting. That's something that really used to affect me was when I was in artificial. I mean, this is going way back even to school. I noticed this artificial light indoors when the outside light was lower than the indoor light, but I could see the outdoor light. So as it was, I mean, again, in England it's mostly grey, but when it's grey and dark outside and you've got artificial light inside, that always was a recipe for a headache for me. So that's fascinating to hear. You have told me a few times, and you've kind of alluded to it here as well today, that you tend to feel that the corporate desk assessment structure is somewhat outdated. And you also mentioned a moment ago that, of course, it's not one size fits all, but are there some absolutes? If somebody is sat listening to this thinking, maybe I don't have the right setup, or I get headaches, or my lower back hurts when I'm at my desk, what would be kind of the protocols that you would encourage them to follow when setting up a desk? Either, can we do office and then perhaps look at the working from home piece separately?
Yeah, sure. So I think if you're in an office, you should have good facilities available to you. If you're working home, then speak to your employers about getting the right equipment sent to you. So I noticed when people started working from home in the pandemic that they were sitting at dining room chairs or on sofas or even on beds. I had one guy who spent 6 months working from his bed and, funnily enough, had a bad back. So it's crazy. Right. Those chairs that you find in offices, they're £500-600 a piece for a reason. So I think if you're feeling like you're not set up right, make sure you've got a proper chair, a decent chair, that you're going to be sat in, one that can be adjusted in multiple different places with that right lumbar support. Again, lumbar support that's going to fit you. I'm 6'2". person next to you could be 4'11". We need different chair setups.
Right.
I would be looking at making sure that you're relatively square on. I'm sat twisted now because I'm comfortable sat like this, but this is for a short period of time and I'm moving. I'm not going to spend the next 9 hours sat like this. So I would say make sure you are fairly squared on. In terms of your seated position, again, the best posture is the next posture. So there's a nice little cheesy quote for you to take away. As long as you're moving around, you'll be okay. Don't matter how you sit. But as a rule of thumb, to set yourself up, 90 degrees ish is what you'll find on like a normal desk assessment. Personally, I would raise that up ever so slightly. If you're listening to this, stand up and just lift your knee up, not with your hands passively, but just lift your knee up. You'll probably only be able to lift it to 90 to 110 degrees if you're fit and capable. So we then sit at 90 degrees, pretty much in that shortened range, because desk setups told us to. So for me personally, normally I would just raise that ever so slightly so that you're kind of 90 degree from ankle to shin, and then slightly going up on a bit of an angle to hips. It's not fully at 90 degrees. Just take those hips just slightly more elongated position, and to see how you feel. Play around with your seat. Don't feel like because HR set your seat up for you that you can't move it. Play around with your seat. See how your body wants to sit and how are you comfortable as an individual. Forget what a form tells you to do. But yeah, generally have yourself fairly squared on and then play around it from there. Make sure the stuff that's around you that you need is reachable. Don't have everything on the right so you're constantly going one way. It depends. You might not have the luxury of space in your office and you need to just make do. But education around workspace setup as well as desk setup and corrective exercise is going to reduce musculoskeletal disorders 100%. But yeah, I think for me, square on. Don't sit at that 90-90 rule. Lift your seat up just ever so slightly, and make sure that your lumbar support in your chair is in your lower back. Move it around until you are comfortable as an individual.
That's great advice, and actually, I have forever until this moment right now subscribed to the 90-90 rule. But I mean, you'll know, Adam. Those that have met me in person will probably know. But I mean, I'm 6 foot, but I'm like 5'4" of that is leg. So the 90-90 for me has always been challenging. But for someone like me, perhaps who is particularly long-legged, or someone that's tall, and we go to the from the 90 and then maybe off on the angle, that's going to raise me higher. And because I am tall and long, can we touch a little bit on desk height? I'm very lucky. This is a standing desk. It has a remote control. It can go up and down. And but is there something that that people should be aiming for in terms of desk height to perhaps stop them either hunching or leaning over?
So I think hopefully if you're working for a large company, they're easily adjustable, or you've got the sit down desks. But yeah, you're right. It should be a case of you should have decent clearance within your legs. You're not banging your legs all the time, not feeling like you're cramped, because then you are just going to lower your chair. You're going to sit too far back or something like that. So make sure there's good leg clearance, and that your hands and arms can rest comfortably on the desk, which they will do anyway because of your position. There's not going to be that much room between your kind of hands being here and your hips. So again, it's just play around with it to make it work for you. Desk clearance for your legs, comfortable with your hands, and yeah, you don't really want to be kind of having to lean in. You want to be able to get under the desk and be at the workstation so everything's accessible.
Great. So probably worth also considering desk accessories. So laptop stands.
Yeah.
Not working directly off of a laptop where possible. Having a keyboard, having a mouse. I went without a mouse on a laptop for years. And it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it was ridiculous. The amount of shoulder and elbow pain that I got, because everything's right in the center. Everything's kind of here.
Closing
And
off.
I'm kind of that's exactly it. And as soon as I was able to kind of sit here, it was so much. We touched just briefly then on. I was showing off with my standing desk because I'm bougie. Any good or no? Do you rate standing desks? Do you like the concept?
I like the ones that can go up and down as and when you feel like it. I've mentioned a couple of times already today that it's not so much how you stand, how you sit, how you lay, but it's about movement. It's about, you'll get problems if you hold a position for a long time. Your body is capable of movement and it is not fragile. So how you sit, don't care, but make sure you're not sat like that for your full 9-hour shift.
Cool.
The same applies for stand-up desk. So I've had people come to me and be like, oh, I was getting a really bad back. I asked for stand-up desk and now my feet and my knees and my glutes hurt. It's like, yeah, because you've gone from sitting for 9 days to stand for 9 hours. Sorry, 9 days. You don't want to do that.
It's a long shift.
9 hours, yeah. To standing for 9 hours. The movement is the key. So I really, really like the thought of stand-up desks. Not only is it good from a physical point of view, but like you mentioned yourself, from a productivity point of view, if you're listening to this and you're a leader, productivity is going to definitely go up because energy is going to go up in the office place. I saw that working in sales as well. The best salesmen were always up. They weren't sat. So, but I like the ones that can be adjusted, so you can spend a bit of time seated when you're doing your admin, and then you can spend a bit of time standing when you're doing something else. Movement, and again, the best posture is the next posture. So I'm big on that one.
On that, I love that quote. On that, is there a period of time in which it is should you be setting a timer and right now I need to get into my next position, or is it very individualized, or will your body just tell you?
Yeah, so everything's individualized, absolutely everything. So it's going to be up to you. I would say, 30-40 minutes. You really, if you start getting into that kind of hour mark, hour and a half, you want to start thinking about moving. But as humans, we're quite fidgety anyway. If you just sit and watch people, we don't stand still. So I think if you're starting to get itchy, fidgety, you're starting to give it one of them, in the office towards the end of the day, you need to get up and go to the toilet or the coffee machine or find an excuse to walk around the office. Just listen to your body. And it can be difficult because when you're in nice kind of high pressure situations and you've got work to do and there's a deadline coming up, you'll see people for hours and they get closer and closer and closer and closer to the screen because they are in the zone. I get that. That's just work life. That's time and money and jobs. But yeah, certainly something to keep an eye on. Put little 10-minute, 5-minute things in your calendar because it'll pop up on your screen and it'll get in the way and it'll be annoying and you'll go, oh, okay, go grab some water or do something. But yeah, definitely movement. Stand-up desks, fantastic, but if you're just standing, you'll get different problems. So the stand-up, sit-down desks, so it sounds like what you've got are perfect.
Yep. Love that. On the point of the notifications, the pop-ups, the big one that I encourage, almost all of my clients, despite being extremely well paid, and they all have a collection of very nice high-end Swiss-made watches, are all wearing some electronic smartwatch, and I'm hammering them at the moment, like, turn your inactivity filter on. I think it's inactivity setting on, and it will buzz you after 45 minutes or an hour. You can set it, and just get up and move. Just go and talk to a colleague. It's a great opportunity if you're a leader, just to ask how your team are getting on, or just check in, or like I say, just go make a coffee, or just move, and you'll feel a lot better for it. I can assure you. Last thing on the standing desk, footwear. We've had this conversation previously, actually, about footwear in the gym. I know it's not something you take hugely seriously, or you don't have, that you're kind of apathetic about wearing certain footwear in the gym. Can the same be said for the corporate arena? For example, if you are if your dress code is either smart casual or formal, and you're wearing brogues or Oxfords, is that, or more to it actually, if I could just go off on a bit of a rant, high-heeled shoes for women. If I could just give you a quick anecdote, and I know you're aware of this, because you treat Bex, my wife, as well. When she finished up with her corporate career a couple of years ago, she was always immaculately presented, and her kind of number one rule was, I'm always wearing high heels. She liked the way it made her feel. She carried herself differently. She felt confident. After finishing her corporate career and kind of going from heels to flats pretty much exclusively, she had tremendous pain in her feet, in her knees, in her lower back. So whilst we're on the subject of standing, is footwear important?
So it is when you're talking about high heels, because the change to your posterior chain and your biomechanics is huge. So like Bex had when she came out of those heels, all of a sudden her foot's dropped back down, everything's elongating back out, and there's going to be pain while she adapts to the new movement style. I think for me, footwear is important when it comes to people who are doing endurance sports, and I do look at people's footwear when they come in with hip, knee, ankle problems. I'll also look at the calluses on their feet where they're forming, so I can get an idea of their gait and what they're doing with their feet and how they're striking and taking off. So footwear and feet are very, very important in my world, and they should always be checked and looked at. When you've got anything to do with kind of anything from the hip down, really. In terms of people changing footwear, I'm not a massive fan of. So I think if you've spent your life kind of learning to walk in trainers, and then you went to school in trainers, and you went to PE in trainers, and you do your sport in trainers, you get the gym in trainers, you spend your weekends in trainers, your foot, your body, your biomechanics, how you move is adjusted to that. And if you change it, you might get some problems. There's quite a few people in the gym here who've gone to that barefoot trainer, which is brilliant in theory. And if you want to move on to them, absolutely, because barefoot is fantastic. Like, you just use our bodies how they're meant to be used. But I'm seeing a lot of people getting problems early on coming out of trainers with arch support and things like that and going into barefoot, because it just changes all your mechanics. So I think if you don't have foot, ankle, knee, hip pain, don't worry about changing your footwear. Just wear what you wear, enjoy it. I used to like wearing a good suit when I was in the corporate world, and I know there's lots of women who wear high heels because they like it, or don't wear high heels because of other things. But if you don't have pain and you're all good, you're all good. Happy days. If you are one of those people listening and you think, do you know what I do? My feet do hurt at the end of the day, or whatever, then maybe you can have a look at your footwear choices, keeping in line, obviously, with any company policies you might have.
Right. Really good advice. I think that's a great take. We talked about desk setup, what it's doing to us. We've talked about getting up and moving around. What can we be doing in the way of exercise, or perhaps what are some things that we need to be thinking about for those of us that either go to the gym or we work out regularly? What should we be doing to offset our 9, 10, 11 hours sat at a desk?
Yeah, so I think if you're involved in sport, or you are already a gym goer, then fantastic, well done, carry that on. And hopefully you're having good warm-ups, especially if you're doing a sport and you're part of a club, you're probably being encouraged to warm up anyway. So a good quality warm-up, getting everything ready for the sport that you're about to do, or the training that you're about to do. Generally, exercise and movement is going to be fine. Strength training, I'm a massive advocate of that anyway, not just because that's what I do, but I just fully believe in it from a health point of view, that strength training is key. If you're not doing those things and you just want to do some corrective exercise because you're finding you've got lower back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, as a result of being office based, then the key thing really is to think about the position you're holding. So again, if we're talking about desk-based users, and there's lots of people who don't use a desk in the office, and they might have different needs. But if we're looking at computer-based workers, people who are sat at a computer, think about the opposite action. So if we're sitting down, okay, what am I doing? So my knees are bent. That means my hamstrings are shortened. So I need to think about some flexibility, mobility, and strength through my hamstrings. As a guy, my legs tend to fall apart just naturally. It's how we tend to sit. So glutes are shortened. If muscles are shortened, they'll weaken. So you get weak hamstrings, weak glutes. We need to strengthen and lengthen those areas. I'm sat in a slightly flexed position in my hips. So my hip flexors are being put into a shortened position, while my lower back and my lumbar potentially is being extended and rounded out. So I would think about those positions, hip mobility, active stretching, things like that to open the hips up, and some work to strengthen the back all the way up. Because again, as humans, we do things in front of us. Okay, so people telling you you're rounded in the shoulders, so what? We do things in front of us. We eat, we work, we don't do stuff behind us. So our bodies are designed to come forwards, which is fine. But again, I would just do some work to kind of open up the chest, open up the shoulders, whether that's stretching or whether that's weight training. And then just think about kind of getting the shoulders rolling, the neck moving, and think about what you're doing in the day. If you're sat at a computer, if you're on a building site, moving around, working, building, what are you doing? Let's go and do the opposite action to that. So in a desk-based worker, I would be looking at things like leg extensions, hamstring curls, squats, lunges, some sort of hip hinge. So if as long as you can do it safely, deadlifts or RDLs. If you've never done them before, go and get some help. And any kind of upper back movement is going to help you pull downs, rows. And if you're doing sport and you're not going to be in the gym lifting weights, then just a really, really good warm up that includes active mobility, active stretching, not just passive movements and a bit of stretching and on you go.
Great advice. I would also be keen, if you don't mind, just to hear you talk through the value of strength training. You know, you're really quite clear about, I really recommend you do, and I know you're big on it, and you and I, we've trained alongside one another, and I've seen you warm up on my max, on my PB. So that was, you know, for those of you that can't tell from the visual, you're a big guy, big strong guy. Talk to us a little bit, if you'd be so kind, as to the value of strength training, and also what qualifies as strength training, because there'll be a lot of people. A conversation I had recently, for example, with a client, he was working out in the gym and he thought he was strength training, and I understand what he meant because he was lifting weights. But could you define strength training in the context that you refer to it as?
Yes, I think strength training is anything that requires your body to adapt to load and tension. So it doesn't have to be that you're training for World's Strongest Man or you want to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. It could just be that you're doing, you know, body weight movements and becoming more efficient at moving your body weight, pull-ups, press-ups, sit-ups, planks, whatever that might be. It could be that you weight train. It could be that you kettlebell train. It could be that you use resistance bands at home, like I did for 2 years in COVID. You know, anything that's going to cause your body to adapt to load and tension, to become more efficient at moving, for me is strength training. I don't know what the dictionary definition of it is. It probably changes depending on who you're speaking to, but that's how I view strength training and how I talk about it. The benefits of it are endless, really. So increased bone density, which again, if you're of a slightly older age group, or in our kind of female population, bone density is really, really important. That's why we do DEXA scans when people get to a certain age to check bone density. I won't go in bore you with the physiology of why it's important, but bone density and bone strength is very, very important. Strength makes us more efficient at movement. It improves our proprioception, so our ability to balance and be stable. If we're more stable, we won't fall in older life, less likely to break bones, falling. So again, if you're the older generation, or even younger generation, strength training is going to help us later on in life. Generally, just day-to-day tasks of being able to lift and move things. The cardiovascular benefits are huge in terms of weight training. Any kind of exercise, you're going to have stronger connective tissue, stronger joints, ligaments, tendons are going to strengthen as a result of strength training. Your metabolism will be improved, so you'll have a better capability of utilizing calories and burning fat. Do I go on?
I imagine as well, to bring it full circle, your posture at your desk will just, as a byproduct, improve. Your ability to kind of keep your shoulders back, perhaps keep your head up without dipping, or I would imagine people that are walking through your door that, I bet it's not everybody, but you might correct me. I would imagine that those who suffer the most from sitting at desks equally would probably not be your strongest, physically strongest.
Yeah, I'd say that's fairly safe to say. It's not possible for us to hold ourselves like this kind of perfect posture all day. You are going to slouch, you are going to slump, and there isn't anything wrong with that. As I say, we do things in front of us. We are designed to round off and slouch. Our upper back is curved for that reason. So it isn't a huge problem. You're never ever going to spend 9 hours perfectly upright. Our bodies just aren't designed for that. However, if you do have a strong posterior chain and you're generally a bit fitter, it will make it easier not to kind of slouch right from the off. I think most of my fit clients who train and do sports, they're coming in because they're pushing their bodies. It's very rare that it's an insidious onset of pain that they don't know where it's come from, through fatigue or dysfunction somewhere in their bodies, because they've kept themselves fit and healthy and strong. Generally, people will come in and go, I was doing X, now it hurts, and we'll go and fix it. Quite often when there's some sort of systemic issue that I have to really investigate as to why this person's getting pain, you find out that they're not drinking enough water, they're having way too much caffeine, their diet's not great, they're not exercising as much as they should do, or return patients that come in and be like, well, I didn't really do your exercises, sorry. And it's like, okay, cool. I think there's definitely evidence in experience as well as research to show that if you keep yourself fit and healthy and strong, regardless of what that is, you don't have to go to a gym if you don't like it, don't do it. But keep yourself active in some way, shape or form, and it will keep you functioning.
Love it. Thank you, Adam. That's a great overview. I'd be keen if we could just take the conversation off in a slightly different direction. We've talked about what happens to us physically in the corporate arena, what being sedentary for long periods of time will do to you, desk posture, how to correct it in the gym. I'd be keen to touch on the subject of stress a little bit with you. And I know that this is a subject you're pretty knowledgeable about. So, right here, right now, we might be kind of talking and booking a follow-up. So you might be the first, not just the first guest, but the first return guest on the podcast, because I think that's probably going to need its own dedicated period of time. But I hear things, or I've heard things in the past. I've been in the fitness industry a long time, a little bit like you, kind of started there, went off to corporate and then came back. And you'll hear people say things like, I carry all my stress in my shoulders, or I carry my stress here. Is there any merit to that? Does stress, mental stress, have a knock-on effect on the physical?
Yeah, absolutely it does. So mental stress will trigger like an endocrinological, my God, I can't get the words out, response within the body. So we have like a stress hormone that's released. And if you want me to go into kind of detail and nerd out, maybe we can do a return, and we can get into depth for people who are interested a little bit more in the physiological elements of what happens in our bodies. But we have a stress hormone that's released from pituitary gland. It makes its way to our adrenal cortex and releases cortisone. So lots of people listening will have heard of cortisol before, and it's released as a stress hormone. Now it has many benefits around the body in terms of our sensitivity to being hungry, our appetite, our utilization of insulin and glucose, bone reabsorption, so to recycle and regenerate and regrow bones, cardiovascular function, our testosterone levels, our estrogen levels. It has a huge impact right across the body. And if you are going into stages of chronic fatigue, chronic stress, and there's normally like an alarm phase, a resistance phase, and an exhaustion phase, which again I can go into more detail another time. If you're chronically stressed for long periods of time, you'll adapt to the cortisone levels, and it will have a huge impact on muscle synthesis, on fertility, on appetite. You'll actually become more hungry because of the way glucose and insulin's acting within the body, but your appetite and your metabolism will slow. And you see that a lot in the office place with weight gain, types of foods that are being eaten, visceral body fat. There's a lot that can happen, and the neurological response as well in terms of kind of tension around the body. High blood pressure, increased heart rate, increased blood sugars, things like that are going to cause us tension. And I think it's also that kind of fight or flight setup of the body as well. Is quite often when we get stressed or we feel vulnerable, we tend to kind of protect our organs. So we'll protect the neck, and we'll protect, and we do this kind of action here. I'm exaggerating. You won't see people in offices going, "Oh my God." Hopefully not. Maybe it's one or two. But yeah, definitely people will become tense and will start to kind of feel that in and around their neck, their lower back. And neck and lower back pain is a whole series of podcasts on its own. People spend their lives studying it. It's really multifactorial. And in my world, when people come in with lower back pain, unless it's trauma based, there's a lot of investigating to do. And quite often the cure is to just relax them and get them moving. But yeah, stress absolutely has a physical response, and it will manifest itself physically. And you can look for those stages. If your appetite is low, or you're craving sugary foods, your sleep is interrupted, your mood's interrupted, you are starting to get fatigue through stress, and you need to highlight that and do something about it.
That's really interesting. It's something that when you talked about the kind of almost the shoulders rising, that's something that I get. That's something that I feel is quite significant for me. Particularly when I'm angry. When I'm stressed, I don't feel it as much. But then again, I think years of doing what I did for a living, I became quite good at working under high stress and high pressure. But particularly anger, I feel my shoulders rise. I can feel my back flare. So that's really interesting to hear that it's not just kind of something you'll hear middle-aged women say, I carry my stress here. It could actually be legitimate.
No, absolutely. No, it is. And a lot of it's to do with that neurological response, that fight or flight response that we have inherently in us, and the then hormone and chemical response off the back of what's happening in our brains. You'll see it a lot in the corporate world. People go, "I'm kind of tired but wired." I don't know if you've ever heard that kind of phrase or something similar. That's normally that kind of first stage of being chronically stressed. If you're tired but wired, your body is starting to respond to long-term stress. If you're then having lots of your staff, or you as an individual, post lunch, you have that kind of afternoon dip, and it gets blamed on the fact that you've just eaten this lunch, which there's a bit of element too in terms of rest and digest, but that also can be a sign of that next stage of that chronic fatigue. If you're tired all day, then yeah, you're in a bad place. You're in exhaustion.
Very
So
interesting.
there's certain signs you can look for with stress, and a lot of it comes from cortisol and the body's response to it physically.
I would love to unpack that a little bit more. Maybe when we've got some more time, because I think
really
that's
hard to stay high level and not bore the hell out of your listeners. But we really could deep dive on this if people are interested in hearing it.
all right. Done. It's a done deal. Let's get another one in, and we'll do stress, because I think that's the overarching challenge that I am met with from my clients, is stress. And one of the reasons, to be honest, the main reason that they engage with me to help them is simply to outsource their well-being. I'm not doing anything revolutionary with these people. We're just getting them to eat well, sleep well, move their body, and look at some mindfulness techniques to improve their mental health, whether that's taking time away from the office, doing more things with loved ones, doing more things you enjoy. Nothing that you can't find anywhere else on social media. I'm not reinventing the wheel. The reason they come to me is because they have 1,000,001 things on their plate, and they just go, you do it, you fix it. And I can go, cool, this is what I want you to be eating. This is, these are types of exercises that I want you to fit in, and we work around their busy schedule. So I think stress is probably one of the first reasons people come to me in the first instance. Not so much that they want to be fitter and healthier. And I know that we all want to be fitter and healthier and sleep better. But I think it's the stress element of them not having the time to do it because they've got so many other balls in the air. So one last question I'd like to ask you, Adam, before we finish up, if you don't mind, because I know your time is A, expensive, and B, very precious.
I will interrupt you though, just real quick. Like,
sure,
anyone listening, what you've just said about having a coach there is, if anyone listening, get a coach, give Rob a shout, because it's so important. We generally, I would say 99.9% of people know what to do. We know we need to exercise. We know we need to move more. We know what foods we should eat. We know what foods we shouldn't eat. But sometimes it is just outsourcing that to take that off your agenda, take that off your list. I've got a coach. I'm more qualified than my coach.
Right.
But I still have one because it outsources it. I'm like, you tell me what to do, please. You tell me what to train, how to train, what to eat, when to eat it. I'll then send you my update at the weekend. You tell me how I'm looking and what you want to do next, because then I don't have to think about it. So I'm a massive advocate of having a coach. I am a coach. I've got a coach. It's so important. And yeah, it takes the stress and the thinking out of it. And the accountability side of that is huge. I would love to just grab a cookie because I love them. But I'm in a cut at the moment, and I know I've got to send pictures in my pants to my coach on Saturday, and I won't eat cookie. So yeah, and I feel great. I'm in the best condition I've been in for a while. So yeah, if you're listening and you haven't got a coach, get one.
I completely agree, and like, I'm not saying it needs to be me either, right? I'm just saying, particularly in busy environments. Yeah, I will put my link in there. Don't worry. Yeah, I'll make sure that goes in. Yeah, you can join my wait list. I think I say this all the time to busy corporates. I get into the nitty gritty of their business, and I say, cool, what are you outsourcing at the moment within your organization? It's finance, IT, recruitment, marketing, consultancy services. I said, why? We just don't have the capacity in-house to generate great social media campaigns. Or we just don't have the capacity to hire an IT person full time. Cool. Yeah, then you get someone else. Then you get someone else to fix that problem. So, I totally agree.
With leaders, there was a bit of research done a couple of years ago. It's the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. Don't ask me how I remember that. So it's 2 years ago. They highlighted that a lot of research done is on workforce and follower mentalities, and quite often leaders are overlooked when research is done. So they grabbed like 370 leaders, which is quite a good amount actually for that type of person at that level. And they found that those people that they studied who have high resource in terms of self-care and autonomy within their business are actually thriving from working from home and thriving in their physicality and their mentality through having that self-care and autonomy resource within their business. So if you need to outsource stuff in order to get that, you will actually benefit physically and mentally, and your business probably will do as a result. And then there's research backing that up, and you can look it up.
I love it. That's you have to send me that, because I'd love to put that out, particularly on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
One final question, Adam, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's really important. It's something I bang on about all the time. Could you give us a very quick whistle-stop tour of the link between hydration and the impact on you from perhaps whether that's from a muscular standpoint, or just adding to the conversation what we've talked about today in terms of your physical well-being, and how hydration plays into that?
Yeah, so I mean, hydration is, our bodies are massively water-based. Everything from our kind of cell structure to kind of neurons to our organs, everything is very, very heavily water-based. It provides us with structure, but also it provides us with our nutrients. So, keeping your blood hydrated so they can get around and deliver the right hormones, the right cells, the right nutrients to all of the parts of the body, and getting your glucose around the body as well. Our lymphatic fluid, which is our drainage of our toxins and things like that, is fluid. It's water. Hydration is really, really, really key in terms of just keeping the body functioning at a high level in terms of cellular level, and in our blood's key. In our kidneys, when we are filtering out what we do and what we don't want, there's a part of our kidney, and again, I won't nerd out on you and bore everyone, but there's a part of our kidneys called the loop of Henle, and that will create a gradient, and we work out whether we're really salty or whether we're really watery. That then determines whether we're thirsty or we urinate. So come from a filtration point of view, we're always looking at, are we hydrated? Are we hydrated? Are we hydrated? Is there too much glucose? Is there too much salt? What's going on in our body? Trying to find that constant state of balance to be able to perform. With that, it's not just water. Electrolytes are really important. So there's quite a few. The main ones that you'll see people talking about is magnesium, potassium, calcium. If you make sure that you're getting those either from your foods, or you can supplement with them really cheaply if you are active, or you're doing a lot, especially in the summer. We're sweating a lot at the moment. Sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, they're the key ones. Very, very cheap supplement to take as well. But they will keep you hydrated. They will keep sodium, calcium, really vital for our nervous system and for our musculoskeletal system. So they're really, really key to have it in your blood as well, driving nutrients and making sure that everything's functioning as it should.
Love it. Adam, I could, well, as you know from our sessions, I could sit and talk to you all day. You are such an encyclopedia of knowledge, and you genuinely love it. And so it really comes across. I think I'm really happy that we managed to capture one of our conversations, because most of our conversations look like this. And so I'm so happy that we managed to kind of get one on film or an audio, because this will be going off on Spotify as well. But yeah, Adam, honestly, the level of care and attention and interest and curiosity you have around the subject or the subjects you're involved in is fantastic. So before we go, mate, where can the people find you in terms of your socials? How could people get in touch with you, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so socials, I'm predominantly on Instagram. There is Facebook and TikTok, but you won't get too much from me. So Instagram is the main one. It's Magni_SMT. I'm sure Rob will pop a link in. That's where most of my content goes. That's both from a professional point of view and insights into my life. And there's also a website which is Magni smt.co.uk. So you'll be able to find me via the website as well, which will give you an insight into the treatment methods that I have, and also if you want to come and see me, if you want to book in, you can come and have a treatment done down here in Southampton. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Love it. Adam, thanks a lot, mate, for doing this. I'm so pleased. As I said, I was writing a list of people out. You were the first name on the list. It's been better than I expected. I'm so pleased with the ground we've covered. This could be like a Joe Rogan style 3-hour long format conversation. But to keep it boxed into an hour, I think is kind of listener and viewer friendly, because we're dealing with super busy people here. So honestly, mate, I'm very grateful. Thank you for being the very first. Thank you for supporting the Helpful Executive. You know, I remember running this concept past you maybe a year ago, saying this is what I think I'm going to do, and you were really excited for me, and you were like, go and do it. So thank you for all your support, mate, and again, thank you for being on today.
No, thank you. I'm really happy that was your first one, and good luck with the future, and hopefully be back.
Oh, 100%. We'll get on and we'll do an episode on stress.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you, buddy.